Good morning. I want to congratulate all of you. You're evenly dispersed this morning. This is the first. Mark the calendars. Not everyone's on one side or the other. No, good morning. Happy Father's Day. If you are over 100, please stand up. Still the oldest in the room. No, we don't have anyone here quite that old. I did see I had a heart ultrasound done yesterday. Don't worry, nothing's wrong with me so far. With my heart anyway, who knows anything else. And I met a man, and we were chatting, and he was an older guy. And as we're talking, and his memory's super sharp, he's super agile. He came in with a walker, but in order to get in, because they hadn't moved chairs yet, he had to pick his walker up and maneuver around chairs. I'm like, why is this guy even using a walker? He's like basically doing a dance, a little square dance with his walker. Sits down, we're talking, and he says, well, I'm 94 years old. I'm like, oh, are they doing a heart ultrasound for you? He's like, no, they did it 2 weeks ago. My heart's fine. Last week they did my stomach. My stomach's fine. Now they're doing my veins. And I'm like, well, why are they doing your veins? He goes, there's nothing wrong with me. They're just trying to figure out why I'm still alive. Very, very funny guy. As we talked, he said, I've outlived everyone. Outlived my wife. I didn't have any kids. I've outlived all my siblings. Of course, I've outlived my parents, obviously. He's like, I'm all alone, but I'm not lonely. Thought those were some good words. All alone, but not lonely. He was a very nice guy. I'm often told, especially by my children, that I'm just too nice. Even when I punish them, they say, Father, your punishment is too kind. You're too nice to us. No, actually, I do get called this a lot, and it's not a compliment when it's said to me. It might sound like a compliment. Like, well, who wants to be called, you're a nice person. That doesn't sound bad. But there are times when people say it to me, and what they mean is, I'm too nice. I should have said something. I should have done something. I should have been a little more forthright with what I was thinking. And this is true. I've been told this pretty much my whole life. Pretty much my whole life. My roommate in college, who was not too nice, would always tell me, Rob, you're too nice. You let people walk all over you. You're too nice to people. We have an individual here, I would tell you who he is, but then Perry would be embarrassed, who also has told me on occasion, you're too nice. Because people will say something and it's maybe not quite spot on, and instead of just correcting them there on the spot, I'll try and find some sort of agreement somewhere and work an angle because I don't want to be offensive. He's like, you're too nice. And that means something from Perry because Perry is often also called too nice. So I know I've really crossed a line. But I'm told fairly often I'm too nice. I'm not always too nice. Sometimes I've had enough and I'll react in ways that I shouldn't. But more often than not, my approach is to be overly nice. Part of that's just because of how I'm wired. It's just kind of who I am. Part of it is because of how I see Jesus and I see my Christian walk. And you may have noticed, I don't know if I'd call it a deficiency or not, but oftentimes I will gravitate towards certain Bible stories, especially in sermons that depict Jesus as just being very, very nice. You familiar with this story? The sinful woman, that she was known to be a sinner, Luke chapter 7. There's similar stories throughout Scripture. Luke chapter 7, and this woman hears somehow that Jesus is in town. He's having lunch or dinner at the Pharisees, Simeon's house or Simon's house, and she goes and she brings this alabaster jar filled with costly perfume, and she shows up at the dining room table, which is just inches off the floor, and everyone's laying on the floor, and she comes and she sees Jesus. And she starts crying and weeping, and she washes his feet with her tears, and she dries them with her hair, and then she cracks open this alabaster jar and pours all this costly perfume on his feet. And there's that whole story, right? And I just love that story. I love that story. I've preached on it multiple times. And it shows Jesus just being so kind and loving to this person who had otherwise been overlooked or ignored or worse. And the story tells us that Jesus can hear the thoughts or maybe even the murmurings of people there saying if he were a prophet, he would know what sort of woman she is and who is touching him, as if to say he's being too nice to her. And I try to model my life after stories like that, or after stories like this, where there's a woman that's said to have been caught in adultery from the book of John. It says that the teachers of the law and the Pharisees and the leaders, they find this woman. They don't know where the man is. Normally, when you're committing adultery, you're doing it with another person. I hear that's how it normally works. But they only bring one person. And they bring this woman. She's caught in adultery, and they want to stone her to death. They're actually trying to test Jesus to see if he will say to stone her to death, because if he says don't, then he's disobeying the law of Moses, and if he says do, then he's disobeying the law of Rome. And what's he going to do? How's he going to get out of this trap? And you know the story. He kneels down, he begins to write in the sand, write in the dirt. We don't know what he wrote. We like to fascinate about the things, imagine things that we don't know. It doesn't tell us, but he writes something in the dirt, and he stands up and he says, "Those of you without sin, cast the first stone," right? I love that story. And from oldest to youngest, they drop their stones. Chemo first. They drop their stones. I love that story. Because Jesus is so incredibly kind to this woman in that story. Let the children come to me, right? Because this whole kingdom of God business wasn't for the children, and yet Jesus says, no, let them come to me. This is for them. And sometimes we kind of get this picture of Jesus that he's maybe too meek and too mild. Right, where he never got angry, never got upset, just always expressed nothing but warm feelings for everyone all the time. We know that that's not true, but when we think about following Jesus, do we think about the rough edges? So we're going to start a new series, very short series, just called Rough Around the Edges. And what do we do with the stories of Jesus when he's not forgiving a woman who comes and cries on his feet and dries them with her hair? The stories where he's not defending a woman who is said to have been caught in adultery. She probably was not caught in adultery, but she was powerless, so they used her to try and trap Jesus. What do we do with the stories where Jesus is maybe not so nice? How can I, Rob Coyle, who's been told, I think since forever, that I'm too nice, but yet I still want to be like Jesus? What do I do with those rough around the edges stories? Those harder stories to deal with. If you're wired like me, they're a little harder to deal with. See, there's a danger ahead of us, though, as we think about this. Because I have noticed one of two things occurs. And yes, if you've seen The Chosen, that's the image of Jesus as he's fashioned a whip and he's chasing money changers out of the temple. We have a danger of modeling our lives only after the stories that are rough around the edges, because some of us are not wired to be too nice all the time. Some of us are a little bit preconditioned to be meanie pants. Right? And we'll look at these rough around the edges stories and we'll say, it's okay. Look at Jesus. Jesus made a whip. He turned over tables. He chased people out. He may have cracked some people in the back with that whip. It doesn't say that he did. It doesn't say that he didn't. And we gravitate toward that story and say, I'm just being like Jesus. Why were you so mean to that person? Well, I'm just being like Jesus. Why did you yell at him? Jesus yelled at people. But there's another danger. It's the one that I fall into. Why didn't you say something? I'm just trying to be like Jesus and be nice all the time. You should have stood up for it. Maybe I should have. I kind of sort of did. I thought it through, and by the time I came up with an idea, it's too late. It had already happened, and I was just trying to be nice, like Jesus. If we're going to be followers of Jesus, we have to kind of look at all the scope of who Jesus was. John chapter 2. My daughter said she's recording how long my sermon goes today. I don't know where she is right now. I don't see her, but this is going to be a short sermon. I know I say that often, and it's never true. I'm a big fat liar. But today it's true. I'm just trying to be nice. John chapter 2. And making a whip of cords. I want you to picture this. Jesus sits down. His disciples are there. We have to kind of imagine the story, but you know it had to have happened. You don't fashion a whip in 30 seconds. It takes some time. I've never made one. But I'm imagining, I've seen them. They don't look like they make themselves. They look like they take some time to make. And Jesus is outside the temple. He finds some straps of leather, or he buys some, and his disciples are probably just sitting there going, what is he doing? It looks like he's making a whip. What is he going to do with that whip? They might have even got pretty excited. Jesus has finally made a weapon. And he sits there. He meticulously takes time to fashion and form this whip. He doesn't just go buy a whip. It says he makes a whip of cords. He drove them out of the temple with the sheep and the oxen. Now we're going to get into this story now. I'm just trying to plant these pictures in your mind. I want you to start to see Jesus in a way that maybe you're not accustomed to thinking about Jesus. A man who, yes, he is kind and he is loving. But that doesn't mean he was nice all the time. You don't make a whip for nothing. He drove them out of the temple with the sheep and the oxen, and he poured out the coins and the money changers and overturned their tables. If you're like me, what do you do with a story like this? No, I don't mean like, well, you read it. Yes, obviously. But what do you do with it? Matthew chapter 23, some of the harshest words Jesus ever said to anyone. We're just going to look at a few verses this morning. I'm not going to expound on them or explain them. I just want you to picture Jesus saying these things and doing these things. Does that make sense? Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. Who in here likes to be called a hypocrite? Can you imagine Jesus calling you a hypocrite? I thought Jesus was supposed to be nice to everyone all the time. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. Verse 27, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs. That's not great. When I was a child, many of you know this, I used to mow cemetery. The tombstones might look great, but what's underneath of them is not great. He says, you're like whitewashed tombs. You look good on the outside, but there's something wrong with you, rotten and dead on the inside. Verse 33, you serpents, you brood of vipers. This is Jesus talking to actual people. You brood of vipers, how are you to escape being sentenced to hell? Just because of who I am, I don't particularly like these verses. These are not my cup of tea. Give me the woman crying on his feet every day of the week. These are rough around the edges. But they're there. What do you do with an angry Jesus? What do you do with an angry Jesus? Remember, there's dangers no matter which path you take. Danger ahead. If your idea is, well, what I'm going to do with an angry Jesus is, I'm going to be angry myself, and I'm going to be angry all the time. I'm going to be fashioning whips at work, at school, in the street, at the grocery store. I have noticed something about people who love this story and refer to it often. They tend to be very angry people naturally. And they use this verse or this passage to console themselves into thinking that that's okay because even Jesus got angry. We're not going to get any more into it than that, just that. I have also noticed the other danger in my own life, where I know that story is there, I read it, but I don't think about how that's supposed to affect the way that I live. I just, Jesus got angry sometimes, and it's understandable, but I need to be over here doing this. And I will try not to be angry at all costs. That's also a dangerous way to live. There's pitfalls on either side, but the question is, what do you do with an angry Jesus? Do you ignore the angry Jesus? Right? Like a child when you tell them to clean their room and all they really do is take all the dirty clothes and just stuff it in the closet and close the door? Under the bed? Pull the sheets down to the floor so you can't see what's under the bed? Look, I cleaned my room. Is that what we do with these stories of Jesus? We just ignore them? Do we pull a Thomas Jefferson? This is an actual picture of the Thomas Jefferson Bible. In case you thought, you guys know the story, right? Thomas Jefferson would just extract with precision, surgical precision, verses he did not like. This is a picture where they just cut them out. Just extract the verse. I don't like that. Gone. Is that what we're supposed to do? Just ignore them? Extract them? Pretend they're not there? Or pretend that those stories have no bearing on our own spiritual walk? Those are things specifically for Jesus to do, but we don't really get anything from it? I want to suggest this morning that we learn from those stories. We learn from those stories. We learn, not that, it's okay to be angry. It is. But we learn to see what it is Jesus is angry about. Why does he say those words? What's driving him to call them a bunch of snakes and vipers? Why is he in the temple? Why did he take time to fashion a whip and turn over tables and throw out the money and chase out the sheep and the oxen and the money changers? Why? It's not because, if you're an angry person, just be angry because Jesus is angry. What makes Jesus angry? What makes God angry? The things that are upsetting to God, the things that are upsetting to Jesus, should be the things that are upsetting to us. At the outset, I also want to say this. I have often heard the passage of Jesus in the temple as being a reference to some sort of idea of what it means to be a man. That's some sort of masculine kind of, Jesus was a real man. He's a man's man out there to whip. Yeah, I don't really know where that comes from. It's certainly not from the text, but I've seen it. I want to be very clear up front. This is not a story about men being men. This is a story about Jesus being righteous in his anger, and that's for men and women. Which I actually push back. It's like, are you saying that women would never find a moment when they would need to fashion a whip because this is about a story about a man being a man? No, they can too. But, no, the story isn't about gender roles or any of that we just got done talking about over the last several weeks. This is a story about Jesus showing what it means to be a holy human living in an unholy place where unrighteousness dwells and lives and often thrives. And it's Jesus getting angry at those things. We're going to look at that. We're going to learn from those stories so that we can apply them, self-included. So we can apply those stories and say, this is what it means not to be a man. This is what it means to be a follower of Jesus. We don't ignore things. We don't extract things. We read them. We dig in. We try to see what it is that's driving Jesus to these not so nice actions. There's nothing nice about forming a whip and chasing people out of a building. No one saw Jesus doing that and thought, what a nice guy. Wonderful. Just wonderful. Right? And yet he was right in doing it. We're going to dig in and see what it means to follow Jesus in all of his characteristics, with all of the rough edges of these stories. That is the end of my sermon. I don't know how I did on time. I think I did pretty good. Pretty good. Happy Father's Day, everybody. Youth 1050, if you are in high school or going into high school, feel free to follow Brandon out, and he'll be teaching a short class. For the rest of us, Perry's going to come up and lead us in another song and regale us with announcements. All right.